Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Systems Mapping Learning Meetup with our Systems Innovation Cape Town Hub. We are a developing hub with the goal to share knowledge and create comfort around systems thinking. My name is Leah and I'm a part of the Cape Town team working with Arsen, our hub lead, and Linda and Sheldon, our facilitators. Arsen and Linda will be facilitating and guiding us through most of today's event, and Sheldon will be assisting with any questions or comments you may have in the chat section. Today, our focus will be systems mapping. In the first half of our session, we'll go through basic elements and concepts regarding systems mapping and cover causal loops, We'll cover causal loops, feedback loops, and system archetypes. In the second half of the session, we'll work together on the Miro Board to collectively map out the dynamics of a food system. Please feel free to contribute and converse with us at any time throughout the event. Thank you. I will now hand over to Arsen.
Thanks a lot, Lee, for the beautiful introduction to the session, and welcome everyone again. As I mentioned in the last event that we had, we are still going through our series of learning meetup. In the last session, we started touching already a little bit on mapping, because we started with thinking, we did mapping. So in the last session, we explore systems inquiry and systems dynamic. And today we're going to do systems mapping. And then the next event, we will explore actor mapping, but also multi-level perspective. So just to start, thanks again. So we're recording the event. So we'll share the event for those who can't make it. So I know that we always start by asking questions because we make the guide available for people to read. And I believe we got the chance to have a look at the guide. So anybody who read the guide wants to tell us what they understand by systems mapping. I think that's the best way to open it. Any volunteer want to tell us the understanding about this topic?
Okay, I can go if nobody wants to speak now.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, okay, so my understanding about mapping is basically it's something that is practical that you do to have an understanding of the system. So it's sort of an overview, looking at the system and who are the actors in that particular system, what are they doing, how are the actions interrelated to each other, and what are the effects of those particular actions. And that's all making up the system. So when you do a map of a system, you're basically having an overview of what the system looks like. From a
holistic view.
Yes, holistic view. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks. I like that. I also like the fact that you started by speaking about the map itself, you know, because if you think of a map in general, so a map is a simplified version of reality. It's a good attempt, but not a full representation of reality. Let's put it like that. Mm-hmm. So it has certain functions, and those functions help us get a good picture of the reality that we are dealing with. And if you look at other maps that exist there, you will see, you start taking a close look, you will see that map also help us orientate when we get lost, when we're trying to figure out, when we want to have a good visual representation. So it orientate you when you get lost to find some meaningful way through that disorientation. So now in case of the systems map or systems mapping now, it's one of the, I always say it, you know, that it's one of the greatest analytical tools that can help us understand where we need to intervene in a particular system. That's why we said systems map. So system map itself, it's very, when I think about it, I can mention a few reasons, maybe three. The first one is that it helps us to understand that the system, when we deal with a system, is more than just some of its parts, because often we tend to get lost into looking at part of the system and forgetting the bigger picture. And when you start looking at understanding that the system is made up of different parts, then you also get to understand that these parts are interconnected. And through those interconnection emerges something that's a nice thing about it. The second reason also could be that when you look at the map closely, it helps you understand the different interaction between those elements in the systems, like the drivers or the variables. And when you look at how they function in the system, then it gives you a sense on how those interactions can lead to certain outcomes. And now I'm thinking of a particular, when you're dealing with mapping a particular program. So it helps you move away from linear thinking. For example, in the context of health system, let me take one example. If we think about the outcome that we want, for instance, to improve the outcome that we want to improve, or we want to achieve and improve change, what I want to say is systems mapping may be very useful to help us see that through, right, in health systems. So, because often, and I'm speaking from my experience through some of the intervention that I did, where we be focusing more on thinking, like, for instance, if we have to increase capacity of healthcare professional, then that's going to improve the health outcomes. So that's just a few elements, but the reality is not like that. When you start dealing with a map, then you can get a better sense or have a holistic way of what you have to do so that you can better understand the system, the drivers and the behavior within the health systems to improve the outcome. And so that you can drive that particular change that you want to. So basically, it's really about understanding how you can intervene in that system. Yeah.
So Arsene, if I could just add to what you're saying, I think it also helps us get a better understanding of the unintended consequences of what's going on when we map out a system, right?
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you guys can help me here, but like I saw one of the examples where they were talking about the fishing industry and like fishing in the lake, and if two companies had to keep fishing and not think about and just think about profits the whole time, they would lead to unintended consequences of no fish being in the lake or something like that.
Yeah, it actually also reminds me. Oh, sorry.
That's okay, go on, Linda.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it also reminds me of the Cobra effect, where the government, well, the colonizers in India, they came into India, they realized that there were so many cobras in the area, and they started offering people money to catch those cobras and bring them so they can destroy them. But then people actually then started farming cobras so that they can get money from the government. So instead, the cobras actually, there were much more cobras than they anticipated. So to agree with you, Lee, on unintended consequences, yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that we can expand more later on when we speak about archetype, basically. Archetype in this exercise. Cool. So I think I should share an illustration of a basic representation as I was talking about mapping, particularly in a program. I'm going to share with you a basic representation of a program or organizational learning process, which could be integrated into a theory of change when you apply the systems map. Let me just try and find it here and share my screen. There you go. So this is, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
This is a good example. So here we have a process that shows how monitoring, reflection, and learning serves to identify and amplify the underlying causes of successful program through here. So I don't want to touch too much about the R because we'll talk about it. But basically at the top here, it shows how you can strengthen the program. At the bottom also, you can simultaneously identify and correct the underlying causes of a program when it's ineffective. I'll tell you concretely what I mean by that is when you do a particular program, you have desired outcome that you're looking for. But the way you're going to achieve that is to make sure that you have the data and information, clear data on information and information on reason for success. And that information will help you do a bit of a reflection on underlying reason for success. And this will feed into program learnings. And then when you implement now, you make sure that the implementation is done in a proper way to achieve the desired outcome. Yet, we will talk about, this is basically balancing and correcting loops, but I don't want to touch on it. I just wanted to show you just a small example of how MAP can help you frame the theory of change as you doing your project. So, but as you see from what I show you on the screen, you see that no element exists on itself. They are connected and they interact with each other. As I said, they are all related directly or indirectly to a certain degree if you see them, especially if you start dealing with complicated math. So, and you see that one element influences at least one another element. So as we know that from what I just saw, systems mapping can be a good start in crafting a strategy that may be meaningful. So, and the reason why I'm saying maybe I'm trying to be careful here is because we never know, because complex systems that we deal with are unpredictable and very uncertain. So we can never really know whether what you're trying to do has an intended effect. But with systems map now, then you can get a step closer and make more meaningful intervention strategy, to go back to the example that I was giving. So I think now we should start unpacking the concept itself. Let's start with the basic element of systems map. So when we talk about map, there are a few elements that we need to take into consideration, right? So we've got variables. In this case, we have A and B. So these are elements and they play an important role in the functioning of a given system. These two. But then you also have relationships, which is in this case, you see the arrow that we have here. It means that A has a certain influence on B. And the relationship between these two elements is a key consideration when you start talking about systems thinking and mapping. And then here again, you see the third element that you can see from here is besides the arrow. You will notice that the arrow alone, when you look at it, it won't really, it doesn't necessarily tell you enough about the quality or even the influence of that relationship. So that's why we'll have plus and minus. That tells us positive and negative influence on one another. And then there is these two things that are here. It's the time delay, meaning whatever A does may not have an immediate influence on B, but there may be a time delay in that process. We will talk about it when we see some other examples of systems map as we're moving. So this is an example, a typical example of a simple map of a food system. So you have starting from here with harvesting, and then move to packing, and then transportation, retail, eating, disposing. That goes again back to growing and so on and so forth. So those are just the connections, this kind of simple connections. Yeah, so now let's talk about the feedback loops. To me, that's the most important. Anybody wants to share what they understand by loops in a system? Okay, so there is a message in the group.
Okay,
Anybody?
I think the feedback loops are basically showing the like you rightly said earlier on, the quality of the relationship among the elements in the system. So what the action by one actor, for example, if you're looking at actors and how that affects the second actor or their behavior, and how it feeds back into reinforcing that behavior or destroying the behavior, if I can put it like that. So I think feed loops to show that kind of the quality of the relationship among the elements in the system.
Yeah. They are components, they are primary component, I would say, of any systems map. They highlight those dynamics, Linda, that you're talking about, which are playing out over and over again, and which end up acting as either significant drivers of change or maintenance of a particular status quo. That's what they play in a map. Let me just share the screen again to show what I mean by that. Yeah.
If I can just add while
Yes.
you are,
Go ahead.
to our
Yeah.
to the Miro Board, I think with feedback loops, it gives us a lot of information, right? I think therein lies a lot of the information that we can use to sort of understand the map a lot more, right? So if one is impacting the other, in what way is important to understand? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Is it taking away? Is it reinforcing? Is it balancing? Yes, it's also nice to have a visual representation, but the real information that one can use to tap in and sort of intervene into a system comes out of where an individual sort of understand those relationship among the nodes and how they sort of impact one another at the end of the day.
Exactly, Sheldon. Because when what you're trying to say is actually what I was gonna add to say, that what we need to understand is when one variable changes, the other one also will change in relation to the previous one, and the loop give you that sense of following those changes. And I think, Linda, maybe this is where I can call you to come and give us in practice, like explain your understanding about these maps here as we talk about loops. Do you want to interpret it?
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so basically from what Asen mentioned about the relationship among elements in a system. So this is one system that we're using as an example here. It's a very good example because it's talking about corruption and abuse of power in the judicial system in the DRC, in Lumumbashi in DRC. So there you see that there are illegal decisions and actions and non-application of the law going on within the system. And that actually causes opportunities for demands for payment to increase. And then that will also increase the illegal payments for services. And then that also causes persistent and normalization of corruption. And then that causes impunity for judicial actors because they feel they are able to do these things. Nobody's calling them out and they can continue like that. And then the cycle goes back to then the same illegal decisions and actions and non-application of the law. So that's one example. There are a number of different loops in there. I think we can talk about loops later, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Just as an example, but then there are many other interconnections there, but because of time, we won't go into the detail of the map, but just to show that this is how things are related, elements are related, and the effect of the actions from, different actors in the system.
Thanks, Linda. That's fantastic. So we can clearly see from what Linda is showing us, we can clearly see that two variables, relationship and time delay in some places here, you can start mapping very basic systems behavior to core underlying elements of the basic system behavior feedback loop as it's reinforced, as she was talking about opportunity for demanding payment, leading to illegal payment for services and creating. So you see how it's get to reinforce when you read them up. So yeah, so that's reinforcing. So reinforcing is it's that. So this is a particular example that I put here. It tells you that if you have a condition, right, and you do something, this will reinforce the condition. It's an example of bank. So the more money you have in your bank, it accumulates more interest, and the more interest bringing more money, and that's keep on increasing and reinforcing. And when we say positive, this is an important point that I want to make, because sometimes people tend to confuse to think that when you're saying positive is necessarily good. So it can be also in the opposite way. It can be like reinforcing something negative, if I can put it. Yeah. And then the balancing loop, as Linda was saying here, it's exactly like, so like a typical example here is you are hungry, the balancing loop. So it tells you that if you have a condition, you do something, this will take a corrective action on that condition. And that's an example, very simple that I put here, is that if you're hungry, that's your condition. And let's see, your body is a system. You eat something, you take some corrective measures, and then you're no longer hungry. And then you get that balance. Your condition changes because you're no longer hungry. And in this case, as I said, the system is you. So balancing feedback loop, it's there to ensure that the system performs the way it's supposed to in order to fulfill a certain function. And they sort of create a stability. So, you know, you're hungry, you take some corrective measures, and then it gives balance. That's why they call it balancing loop. So the reinforcing loops, while reinforcing loops tell you that if you have a condition and you do something, it's correct. It's reinforce the condition of that situation. The balancing loops, on the other end, tells you that if you have a condition and you do something, this will take a corrective action. I think that's an important way of differentiating it. And then we have other loops that probably not listed in the guide that we are looking at, but I just thought it's important for me to talk about it here also. We have vicious loops. And this is a loop that helps you read when things are getting worse and worse, for instance. So the example that I will take here, as you see here, it's a literacy rate. What it says here is when the literacy rate is low, qualifying jobs becomes difficult, which then increases the level of unemployment. And high unemployment leads to the number of households existing at a lower level, below the poverty line. And that will increase the number of those people. And as poverty increases, people are more likely to prioritize income generating activities over education. And that's which further on decreases the literacy rate. This is how the vicious works. You also have another example here of the virtuous. This is when things are getting better and better. So the example that I put here is the parent and children relationship. So what this loop is telling us is when a parent extends trust to a child, right, the freedom of the child increases. As the child experiences the enjoyment and being happy and all that, that's their desire to maintain the privilege increases as well. As you can see, the positive here. So they get more excited, and as their desire to have those privilege increases, they become more responsible. So you have more responsible behavior, right? And it also increases, and which in turn increases the parents' trust in the child. So that's like sort of vicious. The other one is called stabilizing loop. It's not also in the guide, but I thought it's important to talk about it. And this is used when you want to understand how to keep things from getting worse. And the example that we can use here is the use of fossil fuel. Right, as the use of fossil fuel increases, the reserve of fuel are depleted, right, which lead to an increase in commodity price of fuel, which then result to a decrease of the use, how people are using fossil fuel. Right, that's a sort of stabilizing example of loop. And then the last one will be this stagnating loop. This one is useful to understand our action when we do things that keep things from getting better, you know. And here I'll give the example of students and teachers. So when a student show an improvement in the quality of their classroom behavior, yeah, what happened often? The teacher's expectation of that child behavior increases, and now that he knows or they know that the child is capable of, they get more excited. And as the teacher expectation increases or raises, the likelihood that the teacher will make the effort to engage and praise the child will also diminish, you know. And then when the child feels like that, then they feel like they don't receive praise, then their effort also and the behavior started deteriorating. So this is just an example of how these loops work, and we can check them better here as we're doing the map. As we're checking at the map here, I spoke about the balancing loop here, and this here I talk about reinforcing. But if you have to pick an example here of this map here, so this tells us what? So it tells us that if I increase education training for farmers, and their capability improves, so and then that will also improve the supply of quality good available. And you know, we all know the law of demand and supply. What it creates later on is the decrease of price of quality of goods. And then that will also, you know, the people manufacturer will start rethinking how they make their decisions. So this is how an example of reinforcing, and this side it becomes a balancing loop. Yeah, so those are the stuff. Linda, I'm not sure if you feel like you want to take us through here, or you want to talk about the archetype. So it's really up to you to start with either the example of this map, and then you do the archetype.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any questions so far. I was just trying to clarify those loops and how they work. No questions. Okay. Linda, you can carry on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so archetypes, system archetype basically represent commonly seen patterns of behavior in a system. So, and they're regularly, these are arrangements that we see regularly of causal relationships. So when one action happens, can you keep the screen for me, Asset?
Oh, sorry.
When when one action happens, then another action happens, and then those kind of behaviors sort of repeat themselves. And one example is the arms race. It's not here on the screen though, but the arms race where the superpowers in the world, when one finds out that the other has a different or more advanced type of weapon, then they go also make that something that is probably more advanced than this one, because it's about showing each other power. So those kind of behaviors are the ones that represent system archetype. And then the example that we have on the screen there, if you can put back the screen, Asen, for me, thanks. The example that we have there about obesity. This is where obesity is being presented as a problem here, but it depends now which sort of action this person is going to take. So they can go a short way to lose weight and go take drugs, but those drugs might actually cause side effects, and then they might not be able in the end to actually do the fundamental to take the fundamental action that they needed to take in the first place. But if they do exercise, then they sort of deal with the problem immediately. Yeah, but so what we're seeing here are the relationship between, after taking drugs, it causes side effects. It increases the side effects, and it reduces their ability to actually exercise after that. So yeah, and then the other example on the tragedy of commons, the fish example, Lee already spoke about that earlier on, so I don't think it's necessary now.
You can go a bit maybe to help the people understand what I was saying, if they didn't.
Okay, yeah. So basically, tragedy of the commons, it's system archetype, but usually happens in the cases of natural resources, where there are resources that do not necessarily belong to someone, but belongs to a community. So this example of fishing companies that are fishing from a lake that belongs to the whole community, but everybody who's fishing there belongs to either one of these companies, and the level of fishing increases, they start earning more money, and but as they invest more money into this fishing business, then the fishing population is actually reducing and is not being replenished naturally. So yeah, then the fish population goes down, and then in the end, there's no more fish for everyone. So yeah, that's another example of a system archetype.
Thank you so much, Linda. Any comment from the group? Questions? Okay, so we'll carry on. I think we will take the time to look at the maps here. Maybe we can look at this map, Linda. Anybody want to take a go to try and interpret this map based on their understanding from all the stuff that we've said?
Yeah, and I think this one is a very interesting one, because we've all experienced what COVID, what the effects of COVID. I think this is where we actually got to a point to realize that it's actually very, very important to think in systems, and whatever interventions that we are taking in the system, we have to consider all these, behaviors that are taking place within the system. So if you look at
you can grab the screen,
I'll look at
you can grab the
okay.
screen.
Yeah, if we look at the issue of misinformation, I think that one was sort of a big issue, because we were hearing a lot of things around COVID, which we never really understood to say, okay, so in the first place, do we really understand where this thing originated from? Because there were a lot of different versions of what is going on. So there was misinformation and fake news. And then that actually started to cause panic and fear. And although there was a time delay, because it's about the amount of information over time that people were getting, and then that started now to bring fear and panic among people. And then trust also for the governments, it started going down, because people didn't understand what exactly is going on. And when that trust in government declines, then it actually causes the fake news and misinformation to actually increase. And there were other issues related to crime and violence. And this could have been caused by the fact that many people lost jobs. So the rate of crime actually increased. And then, I think that's about the panic and fear and the reinforcing loops. So basically, you can see the reinforcing loop here, where it says R5. So when it's saying R like that, it's showing that it's the reinforcing. And when it's saying 5, it's basically you're going to put numbers to map, because this is mapping really. So you're going to just show that this is another reinforcing loop, and so you know how many reinforcing loops are within that system. So this is one reinforcing loop, which is really direct, because it's just trust in government and misinformation, and it's reinforcing, but it's also important to note that it's a negative relationship. It's reinforcing the negative negatively. And then another, let me just try and pick up maybe a balancing loop. Here I see a balancing loop here. So this is okay, within the environment, we're looking at air pollution, air pollution, yeah, sorry guys, I'm not quite, I'm trying to look at these arrows to see exactly where the relationship, okay, so air pollution actually increases vulnerable populations, and vulnerable populations increase in confirmed cases of COVID. And those confirmed cases of COVID also increase the vulnerable populations there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah,
and
I think
right there also I saw a time delay there, because like once we have confirmed case, like how much time the government takes to speed their action to the response. You see, it shows here. Mm-hmm. And then there is also another delay here when it comes to level of effectiveness of health crisis management. Okay. So, and that gives you a sense on how, you know, interventions, and that now you start to understand that when you deal with government, sometimes like decision-making process is quite delayed, and it can have other implications when it comes to the intervention or the action that you're taking. So that's how, yeah, this kind of map can be useful tool to understand the system. Before we move, any question or comments so far? Or addition from the team?
No, thanks. I think this is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, like a deep dive, which is good.
Yeah. Okay. So a comment, just a small comment, because we know that these loops are really helpful for us to understand the functioning of the systems, you know. But at the same time also, causal loop diagrams real strength come from producing a system map that is often visually appealing, that they hint strongly at the system dynamics, because we're dealing with systems dynamic here. But that is still flexible and inclusive and relatively easy to use when you're dealing with when you're understanding these loops. So you can make use of all sorts of information that you have, especially if you're working on a workshop with many people, be it big or small. But once you put all that information together, then it gives you a clear stepping stone to producing and understanding the formal systems dynamic models that you are dealing with when you're doing. And this, we spoke about it also in the last meeting, the last event. So most of the issues that are more specific to these loops is that they tend to resolve around the use of feedback. Constructing loops require a different way of thinking, you know, and you need to be also a bit more careful, or have a bit of care when you look at it, by also looking at other part of the map. That's very important. And other type of maps also, where we tend to work solely on the variables and the connections. So we need to be able to see those relationships and how they're playing together. So that's I think a key comment that I can give when it comes to dealing with understanding the loops and how they operate and the influence and stuff like that. Cool. So I think I'm looking at the time. Maybe if you don't have questions, then I will hand over to Linda to take us to the next activity.
Okay, thanks so much, Asen. Yeah, so this is we're going to work on this board. Can Lee or Sheldon kindly share the link with Tracy and Jill so they can join us on this board and we can work together, yeah.
I will pop it
so basically,
sorry, Linda, I was just saying I'll pop it into the chat section if that's okay.
Okay, sure, yeah, do that.
Thank
so yeah, okay, so we're going to look at the dynamics of a food system. Already I just put there for some pointers for us to start with, but there are other elements that we can already think about when you're looking at food system. We're looking at how politics or policies are actually made within the food system. We can look at that. We can look at the social and cultural factors. We are looking at health. How does the food system support the health system? Because these two are linked directly. We look also at technology and finance. We can still also look at how technology or transport infrastructure is a part of the food system, and how that actually plays out in relation to other elements within the system. So I think we can already start. What we can do is to get the sticky note here and place it wherever you want to place, and highlight and type your idea. So we would like to connect these things and come up with a sort of a map that can show us the dynamics of a food system. So for example, here we can talk about farmers markets within communities. And then we can link that to, it's under the social and cultural. And then we can already start dropping ideas there. And once we start dropping our ideas, and we see that there are other elements that actually connect to some elements that we have put already there, then we can pick up a line here to help us to create that. So there's an arrow here, then you can pick up that arrow and place it and connect the different elements that you want to connect.
Yeah, maybe just one question from me. I'm not sure about which level of detail we have to use for those kind of maps. So for example, here we talk about nutrition. So do we have to go in more detail, like making the difference, for example, with from obesity to undernutrition or anemia or other stuff like that? Or do we have to stay?
Yeah, I think you can go into the detail that I think, because it's good to have you here, Jill, and I understand that you have a little bit of knowledge in this area. This is where you work, so it would be actually good if you can drop all those ideas here to just help us to see the connections there. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so we can see now the number of elements here, the number of elements that we have managed to put here, and we are also trying to link those and show the relationships. Although we are at this point not showing the quality of the relationship, but at least to show that there is a relationship. So there's an example there that processed foods can also cause obesity-related diseases, and obesity-related diseases can also cause maybe overburdening of on the health system. So especially given if we have to look at the COVID situation, the health system had to deal with a pandemic, which is an emergency. But then there are other issues that are still going on, like these kind of diseases that they have to also give attention to. Okay. Anyone else wants to just give an quick explanation about something they see on the map there that can be related?
Yeah, maybe so the example you gave, or maybe also the impact of food prices and nutrition issues, because I think that nutrition is also determined by the availability of food, but also the accessibility of food and the price of food, and a lot of other, it can also be determined by the education, the regulation, the labeling of foods, but basically food prices directly impact nutrition issues in a lot of countries. So we have a role here.
Yeah, and level of income as well, right, Jill? Like, because if somebody, the level of income determines what kind of food they're gonna access, depending on the money they have available. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, that's why we're working.
Yeah, and then that can also cause. Yeah, and that can also cause social inequalities. I'm just thinking about it now. So because people are getting different kind of income and they're also accessing food differently.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We just have a short time to go. Maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah, maybe the question, thanks, Linda. This looks very good, but what other connections can we establish here, and can some of us do them as you're seeing? Because I see a lot of elements, but the connections are a few. It would be nice also to, as we wrote these things, you know, like to put those connections and talk about it and why we feel like they are.
So I'm not too sure if we put the expansion of the transportation industry, but I'm pretty sure the more they transport, the more CO2 emissions it would be. And I was just thinking, does not farming, doesn't it have a relation to CO2 emissions as well? Or is that not from like the methane from the cows and stuff? Or am I incorrect in saying that?
I think you are correct, Leah. I think there is a connection between farming and the methane production from cows specifically. We have come to the end of our time here. Thank you, everyone, for making the time and joining our learning community as we, sort of get used to and more comfortable with our learning community and getting integrated with systems thinking and so on and so forth. So please, if you do see us on the systems innovation with a learning meetup or whatever intervention we are putting up, please join us. We are a young group, like we say, but we are sort of picking up some momentum and definitely getting to where we would like to get to. Yeah. I don't know if Leah, there is anything you want to say, or anybody else for that matter. I see my colleagues have also dropped off. I don't know, it might be some tech
Yes.
issue, but yeah, such is the way we roll.
Yes, thank you so much, Charlene, for wrapping it up for us. Linda and Arson have experienced some unexpected load shedding, so sorry they had to cut the call, guys. But we
Yeah.
hope to see you in the next learning meetup, and we'll keep in contact with you over the platform. Thank you so much, guys.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the organization of the event.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.